I wonder if you've ever wanted to be rich. I wonder if you feel that you are rich already. Okay, actually, let's test this. What is the most expensive thing that you own? What's the most valuable thing that you own? You may think those two questions are the same, but there's a difference between expensive and valuable. Because one is to do with money and the price tag, and the other is to do with treasure and how precious something is to the owner. As Christians, our faith in Jesus should be the most valuable thing to us. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says when sharing about giving money and being motivated by grace. This idea of giving someone what they don't deserve. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9. It says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich." Here we see this great exchange. Jesus gives up his riches to become poor for us, for you and for me. And what does that mean can happen? Well, we in our poor state can become rich. I asked at the start if you ever wanted to be rich. Well, here we can see that we can be by trusting and putting our faith in Jesus. Now, whenever we think about being poor, we usually think of finances. But being poor can mean so much more. It can be physically poor in that we're weak, mentally poor in that we have bad mental wellness, socially poor in that maybe we don't have many friends. But what Jesus addresses is spiritually poor in that we are lost without him. In our session on time, we thought a bit about perspective. It's how we look at things. And we're going to see that again as we look at this topic of treasure. Yes, we're about to focus on how we think and use our money, but we need to start with our perspective with being rich. It needs to start with our spiritual state, which will in turn lead us to be thankful for Jesus and allow us to get a right view of the world in which we live. Because if we're honest, we all want to be rich. And all of us always aim for what we don't have. And so we think, listen, once I get to this stage in life, once I get to this specific stage in life, in the future, I'll be fine. I mean, we see and hear that all the time, don't we? Once I get this item, I'll be living the dream. Once I earn this amount of money, I'll be happy. But what happens whenever you get that thing or you earn that amount of money? Well, you think about the next goal to aim for. And we see this in life. Many young people, just like yourselves, thinking that maybe they can't get married until they're older and they have a house and they have a car, or whenever people do get married and they say things like, well, I can't really have kids because we're not financially ready yet. And yes, we do need to be wise. But sometimes do we just use this as an excuse? So how we think about money matters. And it will impact this liminal space that we find ourselves in. You see, money talks. It speaks and it can set us free or it can hold us as a slave. And we need to use money in such a way that shows people and ourselves that Jesus is our treasure and not money. Let me read the gospel account of Luke. Let me read verses from Luke chapter 12. Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, well, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Life isn't about stuff. It should be about Jesus. Loving him and loving others. Which is why when we constantly consider about the next thing, instead of focusing on the here and now, God calls us a fool. We need to make sure that we are rich towards God. Everything that we're looking at here in this Liminal series, it all connects. We seek God's kingdom first, as we saw in the last session. And Matthew chapter 6 tells us this, and doing this allows us to get our priorities straight. It means that we see that life isn't about getting all that we can, but giving what we can. It's like that famous quote, you make a living by what you get, you make a life by what you give. And we see the ultimate act of giving as we fix our eyes on Jesus. He's the one, isn't he, who's the author and perfecter of our faith, the one who humbled himself, who gave up his riches. He gave up his riches to become poor and die our death, taking our punishment through his death on the cross. This is the God we follow. This is the God that loves us, and no matter where he leads and life takes us, we want to love him. We want to serve him. We want to be good stewards with what he gives us. And so, how can we handle money in such a way as to show that God and not money is the treasure? Let's have a look at some top tips. Did you know that Jesus talks more about money than he does about sex, heaven, and hell? He doesn't need any money. I mean, God has the cattle on 1,000 hills. You can read that in Psalm chapter 50, verse 10. It's all his anyway. As one man puts it, being rich toward God doesn't mean to enrich God. I think it means count God as your riches. And so this is why we want to handle our money in such a way as to show that God and not money is our ultimate treasure. And so what practical ways can we do this? Well, the first is obviously give. Give. The biblical principle is called tithing, which is the practice of giving. Now, in the Old Testament, we can see certain percentages being used, such as 10%. But there's no set limit or rules when we follow Jesus. But here's what we do know. God loves a cheerful giver. We read that in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. He loves a cheerful giver, not a tight, moany one. And so when you give cheerfully and generously. All good things come from God, and this includes money. But don't bemoan giving. But when you do, not if you do, but when you do it generously as Jesus has given to us.
It may also mean giving sacrificially. Let me read Mark 12, 41 to 44. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she out of her poverty put in everything, all she had to live on." You may feel a bit like this widow in that you don't have much right now, but it's not about how much you have, it's about what you do with the potentially little you do have. So when giving cheerfully and generously, it may mean even when having to give sacrificially.
So when you give first. So a lot of our mindsets can be this. Okay, I have 100% money here in my hands, and I need money for this, this, and this. And I have this little bit left over, and so I'm going to give that to God and his work. The reality, as we've seen, is that this is God's world. Even the cows in the field are his. More language to draw from the Bible is the language of first fruits. So in the Old Testament, when it came to giving, it was about giving the first fruits, the best of what you have, the first of what you had. It's why for sacrifice, it was about offering a lamb without blemish or defect. And actually, it wasn't just animals. It's why Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops." Even Jesus is described as the first fruits, the front runner for being raised from the dead. You can read that in 1 Corinthians 15. And so we too will follow. And so whenever we think about this idea of giving, give the first fruits of what you get. Don't say that I've got 100% now, what can I do with my money? Instead, give the first fruits. For example, just because the percentage was mentioned earlier, 10%, which means that you have 90% left after first giving to God. See, this issue of money connects with time that we already looked at. It's thinking through, how can we be good stewards of what God has given us? And even in terms of percentage, actually some people say, okay, 10% might be a good figure, but 10% should be the floor of our giving, not the ceiling. In other words, it should be the minimum. 10% should be the minimum. And as God works in and through us, or we see need, we can raise and give as he persuades us to. When you give regularly. Make sure this is part of your discipleship going forward from now on. Even from this point right now, can you set up a standing order or a direct debit with your church, with a charity, or even with people who you know who have helped you in your walk with Jesus? And don't do that thing, okay? Don't do that thing where you have to wait until you have a certain amount of money in the future. If you have a part-time job or you get even pocket money, can you give? You see, it's about setting up principles now with maybe the little that you have that will then help you in terms of how you use your treasure when you maybe have a lot later on in life. When you give prayerfully and intentionally. Give prayerfully and intentionally. You see, with setting up direct debits or regular standing orders, it can seem a bit meaningless at times. And you can have the excuse of, well, I do give, but you don't really pray into who you're giving to, or you don't continue to pray. So be intentional with who you give to. Have good reasons. Is it because of what they stand for? Maybe it's because of a personal relationship that you have. Is it because it's your local church? Think through why you are giving to certain things. So in this liminal space, listen, I get it. It can be weird to think about how we use our money because perhaps you're thinking, well, Phil, hold on a second. I'm moving on in the hope of making money. But make sure that you have the right mindset when it comes to your money. It all belongs to God. And we start with the generous giving he does for us. With creation, with his word revealing himself to us, and then by his son Jesus Christ, the one who willingly swaps. He gets our poorness so we can get his richness. And out of knowing this, we tithe. We practice the art of giving. And so we give generously. We give first. We give regularly. And we give prayerfully and intentionally. Perhaps you'd like to find out more about this topic? Then check out what's on screen